Satyuvacha Prajapateste Shvashurasya Sampratam Niryapito Yagya Mahotsava Kila Vayam Chatatrabi Saramavamate Yadyartitami Vibodavrajanti Let go ahead. Sati Uvacha. Sati said, Prajapate of Daksha, Te your Shvashurasya of your father-in-law, Sampratam nowadays, Niryapita has been started, Yagya Maha Utsava, a great sacrifice, Kila, certainly, Vayam, we, Cha, and tatra, there, abhisarama, may go, vama, O my dear Lord Shiva, te, your, yadi, if, artita, desire, ami, these, vibodha, demigods, vrajanti, are going, he, because. Sati said, my dear Lord Shiva, your father-in-law is now executing great sacrifices, and all the demigods, having been invited by him, are going there. If you desire, we may also go. Just a moment. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presta Bhutle Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastya Chadejtarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Pramanichananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakapatarubhyas kripa sindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Satyavacha prajapates te shvashurasya sampratam niryapito yagya mahotsava kila vayam tatra birasarama vamate yadyartita mi vibodha vrajantihi. Yes, so the story. Oh, we didn't read the purport. Oh, maybe we didn't. Okay. Sati knew of the tension between a father and a husband, but still she expressed to her husband, Lord Shiva, that since such sacrifices were going on at her father's house, and so many demigods were going, she also desired to go. But she could not express her willingness directly, and so she told her husband that if he desired to go, then she could also accompany him. In other words, she submitted her desire very politely to her husband. Sorry, I was just in a whole sort of meditation on the Sanskrit and how she's addressing Lord Shiva. She's addressing him te, your twice, for your, which is sort of familiar. It's not respectful. I mean, it's not that it's disrespectful, but it's not specifically respectful. Yeah. You know, these more classical languages, they always have at least two ways of addressing people. One is familiar and one is respectful, or like for seniors. But in Sanskrit, of course, there are three forms. This is, these classical languages, more classical, put it that way. Even just French, which it's fairly classical, but it's not as classical as Latin or Russian, and certainly not as classical as Sanskrit. So Sanskrit has three ways. Three: singular, dual, and plural. And for respectable people like seniors, they're usually addressed with the plural. And that, just Hindi, it's like that. Well, I think there's 3 levels, isn't it, in Hindi? Is it? Who are Hindi grammaticians here? Anyway, at least 2, but 3, maybe. Definitely at least 2. And Russian, there's 2. And they're very specifically used. And well, what made me think about it was that she is, as Prabhupada says, and it's very clear from what she says, she is addressing him very respectfully. It's not just, the usual household dealings, just informal. But as Prabhupada points out, she told her husband that if he desired to go, she could also accompany him. She's the one who wants to go. Yeah. And she understands. Of course she understands. Well, first of all, she understands that her husband has not been invited at all. And it's one of these events by invitation only. No gate crashes. So, but the thing is, for her, because she's the daughter, she's always invited. There's no need for an invitation to the daughter. It's just understood. Like in so-called English etiquette, British etiquette. If you ever look up, it's very amusing and it's very interesting. Different British etiquettes. Sometimes you get sort of tables that if people say this, they mean that. And if they say, of course, children are always invited, but if you're not one of the children, if you're just someone who is at their place or who you meets them, and if they say, just come anytime, what it means is, we don't want you to come. Yeah. Because people who are not family, they must be invited. So that's not an invitation. It's just, come anytime you like. It means we don't want you to come. Thank you. British etiquette. It's really quite something. Yes. Like if you offer them something to eat and they eat it and they say, "Oh, lovely," it means it's horrible. Anyway, that's British etiquette. It's sort of etiquette or something. But in Sanskrit and in Vedic society, there's very specific etiquette. And to an event like this, and of course understanding the background to the situation, it's really clear that Lord Shiva is not invited, and it's not a mistake. I mean, it's a mistake, but it's not a mistake. It's deliberate, and it means, please, whatever, not just please, but don't come, is what it means. But sati, so sati as, such a highly qualified lady, highly qualified lady, she understands exactly the situation. And she understands, of course, that she is invited naturally. But for her to go, just generally according to the standards, for a wife to go to an event of this sort, some sort of substantial event where lots of people will be there, for a wife to go without her husband is really, it's just not the etiquette. So she doesn't want to just roll up on her own. If it was just a gathering of the sisters and the actual immediate family members, then she could go, at least according to standards of etiquette. She could go, she should go, or she must go, more or less. But to some big event with all these different, all the demigods, and as we read regarding, because this is now another sacrifice. It's not that one where the whole, cursing, etc. happened. It's another one. So we've gone into the future a little from that time. So for her just to go, even though she's automatically invited, but without her husband, it doesn't really look good. She would sort of stick out like the proverbial sore thumb. So therefore, she asks him, can vayam, we, if you desire, we may also go. So she's caught in a real social situation, a really nasty little situation caused by her father, and we know the story by now, back to front pretty much. But still, there's affection there. And so therefore, not just she wants to go, but she really, really feels she has to go. She must go. On the basis of being family. But of course, as we'll find out, we don't want to spoil things. But even though she goes, her father does not greet her, or address her, or look at her, or just anything. Just doesn't even say hello. He just ignores her completely. And that, again, in terms of the relationships, you can say etiquette. You could say etiquette, but just in terms of relationships, it's kind of like a vicious type of way to interact with your daughter. Because traditionally, or just in so many cases, the daughter's relationship with the father, if the parents are really quality parents, and if the daughter has really been brought up, really according to the standards, then the relationship between the daughter and the father is very deep, extremely deep, deeply affectionate, and deep in the sense of the protectiveness of the father. And therefore, when the daughter is given in marriage, and it's generally, it's called kanyadan, it's actually a form of charity, then one of the main qualifications of the husband-to-be has to be his capacity to protect, like the father. Yeah, so sati, on the basis of this overwhelming affection, goes there and then is just pointedly ignored by her father. It's so shocking and so deeply disturbing that, well, wait and see what happens. But you all know what happens. She commits suicide on the spot. How's that? That's really quite something, isn't it? I mean, that's really completely astonishing. Very amazing. Anyway, the main point that comes out here is her politeness to her husband. Although she uses te, your, twice, it's kind of more informal, your. But still she's extremely polite to her husband. Husband is generally, at least, well, I mean, the tradition is he's considered a senior. And you know the famous story where from Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur of the snake doctor, if you know that story. Srimati Radharani is is not allowed to go out of the house by Jatila, because Jatila, the mother-in-law, who's definitely a senior, doesn't want her to have contact with Krishna, who, in the pastimes is just always around, looking for ways and usually finding ways to meet with Radharani, if only fleetingly, but to meet. So to stop all that, Jatila, the mother-in-law, won't let her out of the house or the palace. And in separation, Srimati Radharani attains a state of, it's sort of something like death. It's definitely losing consciousness and just, being overwhelmed, just lying on the ground and barely breathing. So, it's a long story, we won't go through it, but in the end, or as the story develops, Krishna himself, the understanding, which is not true, but still it's held, the understanding held is that Radharani has been bitten by a snake, so we need a snake doctor. And so they go out, Jatila goes out to find a snake doctor and finds one who she hasn't met before, who happens to be Krishna dressed as a woman. But Krishna is so expert in disguise that Jatila doesn't recognize him. So, like I said, it's a bit of a long story, but Krishna cures Radharani from apparently being dead or near death, and the door of the room where she is opens, and there she is, she's fine. And Krishna, as the female snake doctor, walks out with her, and Jatila tells Radharani that, this young lady has saved your life. You must give her a big hug. Which, anyway, is not on, is not just not on, it's a total absolute impossibility, Jatila would say. And Radharani hesitates because she knows it's Krishna. And how can I embrace Krishna in front of my mother-in-law, for whom Krishna is almost a mortal enemy? And she says, I'm your superior. I'm telling you. And then her husband, Abhimanyu, comes forward and says, I am your husband, so I am also your superior, and I am ordering you. You must embrace her. So sort of apparently reluctantly, Radharani embraces the apparently female, apparently snake doctor, who just happens to be Krishna, on the order of two superiors. Of course, Kali Yuga is such a thing. And there's a shortage, at least let us put it this way. There's a shortage of men who are really capable or worthy of being like real superiors. And there's a shortage of ladies who, they exist. It's not like they don't exist, but there's a shortage of them who, even if the husband really is qualified like that, they can just really embrace within their hearts that idea that my husband is my senior, superior. There's the tradition, of course, even in Western society, at least when I was young, that for a girl, she's looking for a young man, he should at least be a couple of years older. That's there, at least back in those days. So, but now, sati, and it's really a very important point. She's respectful. She's being polite. In the end, as we'll see, even though he instructs her not to go, she goes. And, all this whole event unfolds where her father just insults her so badly, and she commits suicide. As a result, it would have been better, you could say, if she did what Lord Shiva said, because he wasn't just trying to be the big controller. He was trying to protect her, because he understood what was likely to happen, and in fact what did happen when she went there. But even if she hadn't gone, the relationship was so extremely bad that it probably would have come to that sooner or later anyway. It's hard to imagine that the relationship could have been recovered. But anyway, you never know. They probably have their version of ISKCON Resolve in demigod society also. ISKCON Resolve for resolving interpersonal conflicts. And we've seen they've resolved some conflicts which everybody else had just given up on as being completely hopeless. So this is a very important point, to be respectful. To be respectful to seniors. And ultimately, to be respectful to everyone. To be respectful to juniors. In Caitanya Charitamrita, there's the famous story, and it's really just an amazing story, of Shivananda Sen taking all the devotees from Navadvip, from Bengal, to Puri for the Rath Yatra and for Lord Chaitanya's association. And on the way, one dog, street dog, just some mongrel off the street, somehow or other becomes attached to him and the devotees. So Shivananda Sain, as the leader of the party, he just adopted, just accepted the dog and looked after the dog. He didn't chase the dog away, which many people would do. And he didn't just let the dog just come along and sort of not bother but not kick the dog out. He looked after the dog because the dog was a dependent junior. And so he would feed the dog himself. But one day, as they're proceeding and they're getting close to Jagannath Puri, kind of almost there, Shivananda Sain got preoccupied with dealings, if I remember correctly, with tax collectors, something like that, because they had to cross rivers by boat and they had to pay money. Actually, he had paid money for the dog to come on the boats. He'd actually paid money. And it's not like, in families in Western society, they have a dog or a couple of dogs or cat or whatever it is. And they really look after the family animal or animals. This is just a street dog who just happened along en route somewhere. But still, understanding the mood of the dog, the dog felt integrated into the party and a member of the party, so he paid for the dog to cross a number of rivers. And anyway, something happened, and he had to go and deal with the government people and whoever they were for the whole day. He spent the whole day. And he asked one of the devotees, can you please make sure the dog gets his rice? He must have been a Bengali dog. He must get his rice. And other things, yeah, a little bit, but rice. But somehow that devotee who had been entrusted with that service didn't feed the dog his rice. And the dog, being, an animal, he became disturbed and he went looking for food at some point later on. And he left the party. And Shivananda Sain, when he understood that this is what's happened, he became upset. He became disturbed that this was one of my dependent juniors, and I'm responsible for his being neglected, and he really felt bad. But then, of course, when they arrived just a day or two or something later in Jagannath Puri and went to see Lord Chaitanya. So they walked in, and Shivananda Sain saw the dog is there with Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya is feeding the dog, actually throwing to the dog coconut pulp, this more sort of semi-solid insides of the coconut shell. He would tell the dog, chant, Krishna, Krishna. And the dog would chant, Krishna, Krishna. Oh, okay. Krishna, Krishna. But in dog language, can you do that? Yeah. And the dog would chant, and Lord Chaitanya would throw the coconut pulp, and the dog would catch it. And so there's this whole exchange going on. Like an affectionate exchange. And Shivananda Sen, when he saw the dog and how Lord Chaitanya was treating the dog, he was just deeply moved. And at one point he went up to the dog and paid his dandavats to the dog. So this is really respect. And this is the thing about Krishna consciousness and Krishna conscious society, that it's so respectful. It's very respectful. Sometimes we've encountered people from other traditions who object to devotees offering obeisances to their spiritual masters. But what about devotees just offering obeisances to each other? That's to the spiritual master, that's one thing. But just to the different general devotees, that's another thing. But it's a manifestation of the fact that respect is such an integral part of Vaishnav society, and it's so much appreciated that devotees feel they want to offer respects. They don't feel like they have to offer respects. Those who are a little more advanced, they want to offer respects. As Prabhupada would say sometimes, even to an ant. Referring to the story of, what was his name? Mrigari the hunter, who would so viciously half kill animals and just stand there and for enjoyment watch them suffering and struggling as they're slowly dying. But then by the mercy of Narada Muni, he became such a devotee so quickly that when he saw Narada Muni and I think was it Parvat Muni approaching his little dwelling, he came running out, of course, to greet particularly Narada Muni. But there was a stream of ants across the path. And so he very carefully stepped through so as not to step on one of the ants, and then came out and offered his dandavats. So this is Krishna conscious society, but this is just what happens to people as they become more Krishna conscious. They just naturally, and not according to rules and regulations like, oh yes, sir, I must do this or I must not do that, but from the heart, they want and they do offer respects. They bow down. And, I've mentioned before when I was just a really new devotee, back in early 1973 in London, in this temple which was just full of devotees. So every morning in the bathroom, everyone would offer obeisances to everyone else. And it was just like a Mahotsava. It was a great festival of offering respects. It was just down and up and down and up and down and up and down and up. And for some minutes. It was amazing. So, Krishna consciousness is so purifying. It cleanses out so much the deeply, deeply ingrained, disrespectful, selfish mood of the conditioned souls that ultimately, which contains, at least as part of it, the idea that I am great. And when you're great, then you don't bow down to people who are not great, of course. Yeah. So it's an interesting aspect of Krishna consciousness you could say as a culture, but not just a culture in the sense of learning how to do the right things and not do the wrong things. How to pick up your teacup, for example. When to pick up your teacup. Not before the seniors have picked up their teacups and things like this. But through purification of the heart, the natural tendency develops, and you could say unstoppably manifests, of the devotees wanting and therefore doing different offerings of respect to the devotees. And of course to the seniors, but actually to all the devotees. So, yeah. So she's very polite because she feels like that. She respects her husband. There's great affection there. It's not just like he's the boss and I'm the little nobody. But there's deep affection, very deep affection, but there's also respect. So this is Krishna consciousness, and it just shows, it's one of many things which shows the depth of Krishna consciousness as opposed to the lack of depth of, other practices and things. Yes. So, I've mentioned before, it's just a funny little example which I observed personally. When Srila Prabhupada came to Bhaktivedanta Manor, one of the times, it may have been the last visit even, 77, and Tamal Krishna Goswami was there, who was very senior, relatively, amongst us, the disciples, and there were other sannyasis. Guru Kripa was there, Adi Keshava was there, and maybe one or two others, I forget exactly. And me and a couple of other devotees, we got assigned to serve the sannyasis lunch. And it was really quite an event, because, some of them were not easy to serve prasadam to. Did you ever serve prasadam to Tamal Krishna Goswami? My Lord. So, but he was trying to be very nice. He was very nice. But he was really trying. And he wanted another chapati in the middle of lunch. But he didn't, and there were no chapatis around, they had to be fetched from the kitchen. And he didn't want to say, get me a chapati. So Adi Keshava Swami needed a chapati too. And Tamal Krishna Goswami said, hey, get Adi Keshava Swami another chapati. Oh, okay. And get me one too. It was such a funny experience. But, of course, we have to learn, it's not just a matter of waiting until you have become nice, and then you'll naturally act nicely, because it will happen like that. But in the meantime, we should practice being nice and it will sort of accelerate the natural development. And it's interesting, how nice she's being. If you desire, we may also go. Yeah. In other words, if you don't desire, then we won't go, but she goes anyway, even though he, as we'll see, explains to her why it's not wise to go. Not just because we haven't been invited, but because of what will happen to you when you're treated in the ways you're going to be treated. He can understand. She can't understand. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Any comment or question? Words of wisdom. Okay. Oh, okay.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj, for enlightening us with this thought. I think we all of us can apply to that, to offer respects to devotees, and also whenever we see devotees, even in the malls or elsewhere, we can just offer respects.
Sure.
But due because of time, place, circumstances, like around public places and stuff like that, can you comment on that?
Yeah. Arguments can be made, and many devotees do, that in certain social environments, like with non-devotees, if you do these things, then their sort of opinion of you may go down, and it may have sort of negative implications on a broader scale. Yeah. But, someone who's more sort of, I don't know how to put it, maybe Avaduta even, but it's something like that. Like Mahavishnu Maharaj, Yeah, I've been out on Oxford Street, London, and it's packed. And he sees you from the other side of the road and immediately offers obeisances on the footpath. Hare Krishna. So we leave it up to you. But arguments can be made for, sort of tempering the behavior under certain social conditions. Yeah, it depends. It's not a hard and fast rule that when some materialistic non-devotees are around, you cannot offer obeisances. If you do, it will be an aparad. There's no such rule. It's sort of just a social nicety, really. And there may be sort of further possible implications of, that people may think you've lost it or something like that. Yes.
Since Sati had such great respect for Lord Shiva, why is it that she could not accept his advice?
Because her affection, because she was in a mixed condition, and her, she heard the advice, but her affection, particularly for her mother and sisters, because they were everyone was going to be there, it just got the better of her. Like Dhruva Maharaj, he'd already met the Lord and, come to such an elevated state of pure Krishna consciousness. Then his brother was killed by a yaksha, but it just, got the better of him. And he started attacking all the yakshas. Or Prabhupada it's the same point, really. When Prabhupada was in Mauritius, it's very interesting. It's in the folio if you want to look. It's very interesting. Prabhupada's giving a class in one of the temples, Hindu temples in Mauritius, and Prabhupada's talking about Bhagavad Gita and how, people should follow Bhagavad Gita and then they'll become liberated. And this one gentleman in the audience says, but I don't think it works. No, you're saying you'll become transcendental to, the type of disturbance that Arjuna felt in the beginning. But he says, I don't think it works. Because when Arjuna's son, Abhimanyu, was killed, Arjuna became so deeply affected, extremely deeply affected, and vowed to kill Jayadratha, who was the main one responsible for the death of his son. So this person talks about this. I mean, obviously, he knows some of these things. But Prabhupada explains that, that it's his son. It's quite natural because of the affection. Yeah. In other words, as people advance, they don't just become like rocks. Yeah. So, but then Prabhupada says, but the proof that it wasn't just, mundane is that Arjuna never gave up his service. Prabhupada says, this is the proof. He didn't stop his service. He continued his service fully. Anyway, have a look. It's a really interesting discussion, or little discussion, but explanation by Prabhupada. Yeah. So therefore, when we see, as we see, and we will see, devotees, family members pass away. And we're going to end up at some of the funerals sometimes. Yeah. And if some of the family members who are devotees become emotional, don't think badly of them or think they're just, they're not real devotees or not serious devotees. The real test is that they'll carry on in their Krishna consciousness. Yeah, that's the main thing. Otherwise, the flow of emotions and things, it's like a river, but you have to just let the river pass. Yeah. Is that okay?
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Oh.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. How can we practice tolerance and respect when we're criticized and blasphemed by senior devotees?
When
we are criticized and blasphemed by senior devotees.
When we're not treated nicely.
Yes.
When we're not treated nicely, okay. Yeah, well, that's very important, because inevitably we're all going to not be treated nicely sometimes. And I tell you one thing, if you want to have experience of not being treated nicely, go out and distribute Srila Prabhupada's books on the streets, particularly in some countries, or in a place like London. And I tell you what, you'll get really verbally abused from time to time. But anyway, the thing is, if you're treated disrespectfully or even abusively, something like that, is to understand that this is happening to me because of my previous sinful activities. Because I have treated people like this, the natural karmic reaction is, I am now being treated like this. This is how it happens. There's no, in other words, there is no such thing as an innocent victim in that sense. I mean, someone may be, under the immediate circumstances, an innocent victim. They didn't do anything at all to anyone, but suddenly some people come and do things to them. But that's just on the immediate level. And in Krishna consciousness, we look way beyond immediate levels. We look at the deeper levels. And so, yeah, according to karma, as the Bible says, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. This is how the laws of karma work on the material level. So if it happens, or let's just say when it happens, we have to try to be able to accept that, and then understand that I am just getting what I deserved because of something I did maybe in some previous lifetime, even a number of lifetimes before. And therefore, I shouldn't be angry with these people or person or whoever it is. And take it that it's for my purification and for my education. Let me never treat people like that again, but let me always treat people respectfully. Yeah. So, in the future, instead of people just walking up out of nowhere and just treating us badly, people may just walk up out of nowhere and just really treat us nicely. And you know what? I received a letter this very morning, from a lady, devotee in Ukraine. And she's saying, I could read the letter. She's saying she's in a house. They can't leave the country. And bombs are going off. And shells are landing around, the neighborhood. And she's saying, but I don't want to think badly about these people. And that's not just being told you're a silly fool or something like that. That's, death. Being innocent in an immediate sense, but who knows what'll happen. At least one devotee, I think day before yesterday, was shot, but I think not killed. Shot twice, but not killed. But, it would be a surprise if none of the devotees get killed. If 0 devotees get killed, gosh, we hope so. But it's like that. These things, karma catches up with us. And when we're devotees, because when we become devotees, Krishna takes our karma and we become karma free. But then still the same types of things happen sometimes. And what it is just Krishna taking our karma. He took our karma, and he's giving us a wake-up call. That look, see what material life is like, and material consciousness is like, and see what happens when you do things you shouldn't do, how it comes back. So therefore be determined to be Krishna conscious. What's your how do you feel about that?
Yeah.
I know I've seen in newspapers when, not now, but going back a few years, there was something happened to someone or some people and there were letters to the editor about this incident, and someone said, it's their karma. And then this whole lot of people wrote in and said, how dare you say that? Yeah. How dare you say that? And really got on the case of the person who said, well, it's the person's karma. Because it's difficult for the conditioned souls to accept that they or others deserve some things from previous activities. Even though on the immediate platform, it seems like they don't deserve them. Think about it. It's food for thought. Oh, Hare Krishna.
I've been put in a situation where a junior devotee practicing has been disrespectful and very controlling and been abrupt. How do we handle the situation?
Yeah, well, I would say that, if they're being disrespectful like that, it would appear that you're trying to preach to them to change their behavior or their mentality. Would probably not work. So therefore, it would be a good idea to refer it to some senior or seniors who that person might listen to more than they might listen to you. In principle, that's how we work in Krishna consciousness. Hopefully then the seniors we refer it to will be responsive and not just sort of forget about it. But that's, in principle at least, that's what we should do. But at the same time, whether something is done about it or not by seniors, understand that it's because you did some nonsense of that sort in the past, therefore it's happening to you. So you can't become too sort of self-righteous, How can they say things like that to me? How can they treat me like that? Because I'm a good person. In fact, I'm a very good person.
Yeah, but you see, when you're concentrating and doing your service and you don't speak, you're just quiet and being silent, and things are thrown at you in an abrupt way, and I don't retaliate to it. So how do I?
Well, just try and do like what I said, but even if the seniors don't take action, or if they do also, take it that it's a lesson for you for developing your tolerance, because when the time of death comes, you can't do anything. You just have to tolerate. You can't complain that, I'm not ready enough. Why is it so painful? Those sorts of questions. You just have to hang on to the lotus feet of the Lord. As Prabhupada said, at the time of death, you have to fly your own aeroplane. Others can't do it for you. They can give support, but you actually have to focus. So difficulties of different types, they are practice runs for the time of death. But what is the right thing to do within the society is to refer it to senior devotees who may be able to intervene and correct the person who's being offensive.
Thank you, Maharaj.
last question. How can we not be angry at the instrument of our karma?
Not be angry?
At the instruments of our karma.
Well, I mean, we could be angry at ourselves. How was I so stupid in the past to do that nonsense, which is now coming right back on my head and causing me pain? You know, in other words, a way we sometimes try to illustrate the idea is that if someone comes up and punches you, it's generally we'd understand that it's because you, sometime, whenever it was, walked up to someone and punched them. But now you are getting punched, but it's because you punched. So you could say that in effect, you are punching yourself. You get the idea? In effect, that's what it's like. If instead of punching the other person, for whatever reason, you had tolerated and just carried on, then this person now would not have punched you. So to get into a blame game in these types of events, the devotees, this is one of the great signs of making a little advancement as a devotee. One can get out of blame games and take more responsibility for one's life, including the negativity that may come in one's life. Is that okay? Hare Krishna. Oh, some word. No, it's okay. I don't. Yeah.
Point of being angry at the instrument of your karma.
Right.
I mean, anger, we develop the reaction of anger for various reasons, and one of them is that that person must also be punished
Right.
for what they did to me. And, you know, we could never do what is really appropriate to that person, but karma will do it. So we can take some solace if we want to,
Right.
that there's nothing more exacting than karma.
Right.
And that person who has inflicted the pain on me, it's not our issue anymore. That
Right.
person, through the course of material life, will experience the pain that they fully deserve.
Right.
We won't do it as well.
Yeah,
as
true.
karma will, yeah.
Yeah, particularly, you know, like Adolf Hitler, how many people hated him. Oh boy. And they, you know, so many people, I'm sure they wanted to kill him. You know, like burn him to death, one match at a time. Something extreme. But Yamaraj, Lord Yamaraj, you know, he has the consciousness or like awareness of the super soul. So we don't need to worry, and as you can say, if we really want to, we can sort of take comfort that this person is definitely going to get what they deserve, and they're going to feel it. They're just really going to feel all of it. So therefore, I don't need now to sort of take the role of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in seeing that a person's reactions are exacted upon the person. I don't need to do it. For a devotee, particularly for anyone, but particularly for a devotee, it's just a big distraction. Hare Krishna. Devotees, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
His Holiness Srila Bhakti Caitanya Swami Maharaj ki.
Oh, Hare Krishna. Thank you. I don't deserve it, but you're a kind devotee. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Oh, Phoenix, I'm not sure. Yamaraj Prabhu will know. But you know, Yamaraj Prabhu, you know, I've